So here I am, all of you. Thank you for being there. And I will be presenting to you not so much about the past, but about the future. Um, and I was associated with ICLAM, the predecessor of WorldFish, as a consultant when I was doing my PhD, because I had worked in Indonesia, and the founder of ICLAM thought it was nice work, so he hired me for 3 months. And that was in 78. I'm old. And in 79, I was hired as a postdoc. And then I moved up, became a director. Then I went to the University of British Columbia, and I was advisor to the fish-based project that you saw. So that was the past. And rather than talking about that, I would talk about the future, and especially the big issues of our time. So far I know, as a member of CGR, the WorldFish must think globally, with emphasis on the global south. And I will get back to this term very often. Now, fish, in the widest sense, including other mollusks, crustaceans, and stuff, they have three major production systems: marine fisheries, freshwater fisheries, and aquaculture, including mariculture. Now, if we start with marine fisheries, first of all, the FAO, that's the black line everywhere in these four pictures, underestimate the catch that is provided by the countries annually. So the various countries that are member of FAO send catch statistics which are horribly incomplete. They don't include discards, about 10 million tons. They include about half of the artisanal fisheries, none of the recreational fisheries, and none of the subsistence fisheries. This automatically creates a bias for World Bank consultant and others who work on fisheries, because they dismiss small-scale fisheries because they don't exist, or because they are small, they think. And we have developed over the years a technique which we call catch reconstruction, which comes from a hobby I have in linguistics about language reconstruction, that like Proto-Indo-European or something. Catch reconstruction involves getting all kinds of possible sources, using them to compensate for what is missing. For example, coastal small island states in the Pacific, they report catch of tuna, but they don't report the catch that is consumed locally of coral reef fish. But the World Health Organization tells you about what people eat. So that can be brought in the picture. Also, for olden days, you can have colonial literature reporting on the catch of the former colonies. So a wide variety of sources allows us to reconstruct the catch in amount, to assign it to sectors, which the FAO also doesn't do, and thus to show what small-scale fisheries, how the importance that they have, especially because the catch is landed in rural areas and is consumed locally and is not subject to being sold in international market in richer countries. We also can assess the catch by gear that are not encouraging the persistence of ecosystem, meaning trawler that destroy ecosystems. I was in my pre-ICLAM time, I was for 2 years working for the German government in introducing trawling in Indonesia. Trawling is equivalent to using a bulldozers to pick pansies in a Jardin des Plantes in Paris. It destroys ecosystems. And the reason for this catch that is maintained is expansion, because none of the industrial fisheries of the world that we have is sustainable. It generates higher catch because it expands. It expands in space, and it expands in depth, and it expands in taxonomically in that species that were before not targeted are being targeted. The next fish that will be targeted now are mesopelagic fish that cannot be harvested because they don't school. There's about 20 billion tons of them in the world. They cannot be harvested, but they will be, because aquaculture for salmon requires food. And krill will not be enough because it will be gone soon. So that is what exploits the world, and it is expanding rapidly. And this expansion, you can see it. That is the primary production required for, in the 50s, to maintain the catch that were observed at the time. This this can be generated because we know from fish base the trophic level of every fish that is caught, and then given the trophic level and transfer efficiency between trophic level, we can calculate how much plankton must be, there must be, is incorporated into the fish that we catch. And we know primary production globally from satellite reviews. So that was in 1950, and you can see that we had substantial, there were fisheries all over the world by then on coastally, but we had an impact only in industrialized countries. You can see that around North Atlantic and East Asia, and that's the world now. And the only part of the world that is not fished like crazy is Antarctica, and it's coming because we're going for krill. Now, this fishing has reduced not only the biomass, the amount of fish that is out there in the world, but it has also reduced the position in the food web of these fish. Before they were big ones, and now the trophic levels goes down. And the different the colors here, dark blue is coastal, and then further offshore, and the high trophic level of tuna offshore is because there is nothing else that we can catch offshore than tuna for the time being, tuna and sharks. But as soon as we go into mesopelagic, which have a trophic level about 2, it will drag that down. So what happens globally is this. This is a representation of a paper that we did in '98. Basically, fishing starts with big fish. Everywhere we can catch them, that is, everywhere the fishery is industrialized. From the moment we apply fossil fuel and to drag a net, as opposed to the fish catching themselves by moving into a net. That is the essential transition into industrial fishing, moving the net as opposed to the fish moving themselves. And so, industrialize the fishery, we catch big fish, then medium fish, then small fish, then nothing. Because at the same time, because we use trawler, we drag down, we destroy the ecosystem. These things are not flowers on the bottom of the sea. These are animals that provide food and also shelter to the young fish that needs to that. This fishing down and fishing went along with destruction of biodiversity. Obviously, the whales, the marine mammals, have been the first victim because we use whales for lighting our cities, the whale oil, and the whales are recovering a little bit, but the other marine mammals are not. And the presence of plastic in the ocean is a new level of danger that they are facing. Birds are not recovering, and birds are dragged down. Seabirds are dragged down by baited hooks, that are sunk into the sea. The birds go after these baited hooks and are drowned. And I've also the decline in the biomass of the tuna. Tuna hunt from below. They bring the small fish to the surface, near the surface, and the birds can go after them. If the tuna are gone, the birds have no access. So the main issue in marine fisheries is that large-scale industrial fisheries, whether in country or in a distant border fleet, are globally ceased to be profitable. They represent a system. Fisheries nowadays, industrial fisheries, are not local activities that can be understood locally. Like the weather, they are global activities. Like the financial system, they are global activities. If a country were to decide to protect its resource and have, therefore, lots of resource, this country would be beleaguered and assaulted by distant water fleet, fishing illegally, and bringing it down to the level of the average level of these resources globally. And this is also the reason, this lowering level, why China is now becoming the main distant water fleet, because they have the lowest cost or the highest level of subsidization. If you see a Chinese vessel, it's a rust bucket, and the working conditions are very bad, and overall the level is getting lower and lower, and they can only operate with enormous amount of subsidies. Rashid and I have worked on this a lot, and the distant water fleet not only destroy ocean biodiversity on a gigantic scale, but they destroy the livelihood of artisanal fishers. Especially, we can see that in West Africa. And I recommend to you a film that just was released, Ocean, David Attenborough, which is an indictment of industrial fishing, where you see a man on a little boat, like big like this, and all of a sudden there's a gigantic shadow in Liberia of a boat overwhelming. What is that boat doing there? It shouldn't be there, because it should be separate. If that's at all existing, if that's all legally operating in Liberia, it shouldn't be there. It should be far away from the coast. So the livelihood of artisanal fishers the world over is threatened. This is very strong in West Africa. I'm coming from a month at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Paris, which I didn't know existed before I was invited. And there I worked on the Senegalese migration, which is due to the devastation of the resource that were available to them by industrial foreign fishing. So the solution is quite simple, you could say. No subsidies, creating network of MPA, and closing the high sea to pole fishing. Now, closing the high sea pole fishing, you would see an argument in Nature. There's a paper that Rashid and I and other people worked, and the logic is presented there. We would not lose anything in terms of fish, but we would gain a lot in emissions saved, in equity, in the distribution of fish that are caught, and this would be overall a good thing. Creating network of MPA is important. I just spent a month in France. I'm supposed to be French, so I can criticize. And I must say that France has a worse record in establishing MPA that have zero protection. You can, in France, create an MPA, and 30%, our president will pretend at the conference that is taking place in 2-3 days in Nice, it will pretend that we have 30% MPAs, marine protected area. This is a lie. We have 0.1% of areas in the French EEZ that are protected, because you can troll in French MPA. You can troll and devastate everything in French NPA. And France is acting as the defender of this policy in Europe, and at the Montreal coming Montreal agreement, sabotaged all protection. Now, how about small-scale fisheries? They are, as I mentioned, underreported by a national organization, and this especially affects the catch of indigenous fisheries. And this is particularly bad in freshwater fisheries. I have given them a little bit less attention, and now it's coming because they appear to generate smaller catch. They are ignored, and the knowledge that is gathered by small-scale fisheries is generally ignored. For example, in British Columbia, in Canada, where I lived, the settler government 120 years ago decided that the First Nation should not fish and forbade them fishing. They had been fishing 10,000 years, and they had learned to save the salmon. Now, they were forbidden from fishing, and the result of it is that the salmon in British Columbia have been the catches and have been steadily declining toward nothing. We will see a few decades, it's going to be nothing, because the First Nation who had learned to push salmon to sustain salmon have been eliminating from fishing. Now, there is also one reason which is logical why freshwater fisheries are more difficult to monitor. It's simply that it is over the surface, whereas a coastal fishery has to land on a longer line, and so it's going to be inherently more difficult with limited means to cover fisheries in freshwater. So the freshwater fisheries of the world are miserably reported, and so we have invented a new trick. You have in gray, dark gray, the catch reported to FAO by country X. On the other hand, you have this dot up there, maybe an estimate, a very good estimate of a survey that was published in the peer review literature that took account of everything. And you can see that if you use the population to do weighting, you can infer the catch of these fisheries. So I will skip because we have little time, and we have, using this technique, been able to show that Africa small-scale fisheries produce much more than anticipated. I will skip that. And for aquaculture, I would say the following. We have two forms of aquaculture. I call it A and B. A is Asian type. This is herbivorous fish, tilapia, carp, and so on, that you don't need to feed. And we have aquaculture B, which I call B for bad. This is aquaculture that consumes fish. You have 4 tons of sardine needed to produce 1 ton of salmon. And the more aquaculture developed, the more Norwegian type aquaculture developed, the more we have food deprivation elsewhere. In West Africa, for example, in Senegal, the sardines are not available anymore to the population. The consumption, fish consumption had declined by half. And I will end up with advice. I was not I'm not supposed to give advice. I was not sure whether to say it or not. I know that there are discussions in SAG whether something like fish that is irrelevant could be eliminated or not, and that's a bad discussion, but it happens. But in any case, if we want to address the problem of fish, we have to address it on a global basis, because given limited resource that WorldFish has, any solution that is only local cannot help. There are initiatives like looking at subsidies, looking at MPA, that have to be solved only by the UN, by the international organization. And I encourage WorldFish to emphasize this, because local work, if it is not scalable, doesn't help. Thank you very much.